All right, we'll start the August business session of the Board of Education. First item on the agenda is President's Report. All the board members are in attendance. And our next board meetings are Wednesday, September 18th and Wednesday, October 9th. And we want to set November, it would be November 13th.
Yeah, there will be a, we'll have to do our budget session too at the end of October. So, just so that you know that.
All right, moving on to administrative reports. Item A, preview 1920 budget and strategic planning post-referendum.
So I did just do a short presentation, so I'll flip a light off here so you can see that. So with the referendum and the state budget both, the good news on the state budget was the state did account for about $175. Well, this year it'll be $175 more per pupil in the revenue limit calculation, and about $100 more in our per pupil categorical aid. So it's an overall budget picture at the moment. You know, the budget, we still have some items that are some unknowns. When you look at the budget and its effect, say, on the taxpayers, we don't have our final equalized value, but at least the published municipal equalized values are trending quite a bit higher than we predicted when we went through the referendum process this last year. I believe in the village of Port Edwards, the municipal equalized value for the village is about 6% higher. The kicker where it becomes difficult for the district to calculate that at the moment until we get a number from the Department of Public Instruction is, there's some things like, we're only part of Seneca, we're only part of Saratoga, we're only part of the town of Port Edwards. So we can do some estimations there as to what that's going to do in equalized value. But until we get that final number, you know, it is possible that our mill rate could be slightly lower than what we had predicted during the referendum process. And we tried to be conservative in the referendum process. Probably something interesting in the state budget that happened, though, was they gave money to revenue limit, which actually works against us on our mill rate for our taxpayers, or our property tax rate, because that goes to property taxes. The good thing, though, is if our value went higher, that offsets at least the mill rate and could help us out there. So right now it's looking positive that way. In the total budget, let's see. Uh-oh, might have to have you do this, Lisa. There we go. I bet she's going to work now. Okay, I think I did just get it off sleep mode. So our referendum priorities were close the deficit, update curriculum, building improvements, and school vehicle upgrade. So our number one priority, close the deficit. So with the state budget and the help of the referendum, we would predict that we're able to close this deficit now moving out for the next few years. That might, you know, we may need to tweak our budget numbers each year on certain items, but you'll see how that's probably possible as we discuss this. Some of the things we need to do, though, we need to monitor our revenues and potential extra sources of revenue. So that's continuing to look at things if there's grant money available for different projects. That can get onerous at times, so we obviously want to make sure that if we do go for grants, that it's not something that's putting a lot more work on us than it is worth doing, because there are times when that happens. But again, continuing to look for those items. And again, monitoring that revenue so that we're making sure that the revenue stream is staying solid. Monitoring our expenditures, looking for ways to be efficient with the expenditures and get the most out of our dollars. One thing that Lisa and I worked on the last couple of years, just to give you an efficiency item, is we now buy our natural gas. We try to shop the natural gas now for the best gas rate versus at the best time of year versus just being on the Alliant budget cycle. So we actually work with a third party now We actually don't purchase or not aligned, I should say, We Energies. We don't purchase our gas directly from We Energies any longer. There's trend lines that we look at to try to buy gas when it is cheaper, and then we also go back and look at what We Energies rates are, because of course we don't want to get to a point where that's not saving us dollars. And again, is it possible we could eliminate short-term borrowing? Possibly next year, but again, we need to do some work at looking at the low points in our revenue stream. We know that this November will be a low point. The most state aid gets paid to us in June, and our taxes come in January and December. So by the time you get to November, the revenue stream is quite small at that point. So, but there are some things maybe we look at project-wise or expenditure-wise that we can really try to hone that in so that we're not, so that we can work our way out of short-term borrowing. So, curriculum update, priority number 2. We've had no real major K-12 full area curriculum updates in the last 5 years. We have had some enhancements. For instance, we did some elementary reading at the K-1-2 with the Super Kids program, but that was really focused at K-1-2. But we haven't had, we know we're far behind on our science curriculum in terms of an update cycle. We know that social studies is behind. We know we need to do some work in English language arts and reading. Our last full big scale curriculum update was mathematics. And there are some math things we need to do along the way. What we lack, since we got to the point where the budget was so small, we lacked the resources to really continue to affect major curriculum changes. Because when you talk a curriculum change, you're talking study what that curriculum, what the standards are, study what the curriculum choices are, and then go out and you're probably looking at a repurchase of resources. Without those resources fiscally, you don't do that. So we need to have a strategic plan moving forward. We need to look at how we move this forward so that each year we are knocking off significant portions of our curriculum while we have the opportunity. So looking at a system for how we study the curriculum and then making those recommendations is really important. And then looking at what order. So what we're looking at this year is K-12 science, K-4 math, 3-8 reading is a possibility, and then we need to have that long-term plan. When are we updating tech ed? When are we updating music? When are we updating social studies? When are we updating high school English language arts? All of those areas need to be taken in. Career and technical education courses, such as family and consumer education. Counseling resources actually falls under curriculum. So those are some areas that we have to look at, and we've done very little. The best day I had this summer, bar none, funnest moment as district administrator, because this has not happened since I've been here. Lisa and I sat down, started looking at the initial take on the budget, and I got to tell her to increase the curriculum line. So there's still a little play in the budget yet, so it's possible we could add a few more dollars in there yet. And some of these things, for instance, you know, if we look at expenditure of money for K-12 science, maybe that comes out of this year's money, but we look at as soon as July 1 ticks and we can spend next year's money, maybe that's when we're looking at the 3-8. We have it prepped, so it's ready to go. We do the work this year, for instance, 3-8 ELA, so that maybe on July 1 we're purchasing that curriculum moving forward. So we want to do this strategically so we're getting the most bang for our buck. We told the taxpayers we were going to do this, we need to do it.
So obviously, when you say implementing classes, obviously it's not going to be this year, or?
We want to make some shifts moving into the next school year. This year,
right.
we need to get the ducks in order and do the research and do that. The good thing with science, I'm hoping science is not a long process. They did a lot of that work, and then we couldn't move it forward. So I'm hoping we go back to that work, kind of pick it up and go, is it still valid? It was done 4 years ago now. It may still be valid. What they may need to look at is what the actual resources are, but they were looking at implementing standards differently and whatnot because we have a whole new set of science standards that's out there. So, so science may be able to be quickly in it, but it may not be full implementation by the end of this year. But it may be getting their ducks in the order. I think we can knock off these areas this year. And again, it might just be the timing of when things are purchased gets played out a little. Building improvements. We want to work to continue to enhance our infrastructure, technology, deferred items. At the moment, we're looking for an increase to about 100,000 is what we've currently budgeted for to deal with some of these items. And when you talk about an item, you look at our elementary electrical system, which is a $30,000 to $35,000 upgrade we had not anticipated. So I would love to say it's that's in this 100,000. So you're already talking, okay, so we've already spent that. But that does still leave us some room this year for making some significant infrastructure improvements in areas. We've started to work on some of our technology, security system, phone system, and some wireless capability. There is more that needs to be done there. But there's areas, the main hallway flooring in this building, some hallway flooring in the high school. We've got 2 roof sections yet at the high school building that were not part of energy efficiency that need to get replaced in a little more short order than 20 years. These are probably within the next 4 or 5. So one of the things I'd also like to talk about is, it is probably behooves us at this point, now that we've finished energy efficiency and we really tackled some big dollar items in terms of heating, air conditioning in this building, and roofing and some electrical upgrade to lighting, we probably now need to think about what is our strategic plan in terms of a longer range facility plan. I'm not talking building new facilities, I'm just talking what do we need to get done in the next 5 years, and what do we need to look at 6 to 10 years out, and what's even out there 20. You know, this building, roofing, should be 20 plus years. Most of the high school now is 20 plus years. So some of those items we go, okay, we shouldn't have to deal with big ticket roofing items. There will be a couple though, but you know, in the longer range, in that mid-range, that 6 to 10, we shouldn't see a roof come up in the 6 to 10 range. You know, so, but you know, looking at again that infrastructure and really taking a hard look and coming up with a facility. Here's our facilities plan and what we want to accomplish, and then going again to our constituents and saying, here's what we intend to accomplish to keep these facilities looking good, in good shape, and ready for the kids with the technology they need. So, priority item number 4, we'd like to, and we've built into the budget the purchase of 1 new school van this year, maybe a second one if the budget is really nice to us this year. But we sent out requests for proposals to 4 dealerships. 1 responded. The reason only 1 really responds, there is no profit margin in selling a school district a van. What they get is the sticker on the back of the van. Because of the government discounts and the fleet discounts, there's really no profit margin in it. The van retails at approximately $42,000. Those discounts bring it down to $31,000. It's a 10-passenger van. There are some safety features, what they call pre and post collision braking, lane keeping system, and side curtain airbags that are now standard. And our goal is to utilize better capacity of the vans to eliminate some of our trips that we're taking a bus for 14 kids. You know, that's if we can get away from some of that, then we're saving the dollars down the road on the busing. So. The other thing I will say with this, if we order it tomorrow, we don't get it until probably December. So it's, and I'll get to this in the proposal, the only real true option for us is through, to look at Ford, the Ford Transit. What Chevy offers and what Chrysler offers in this range is not really doable for us. So, yeah. Overall school improvement is something that, again, I want to stress as we look at this. So, you know, as we move forward in the next 5 years with the referendum, looking at our systems for assessment, looking at staff supervision and evaluation, our budget processes, staffing and general operations, and really truly in terms of budgeting, what we ultimately want to do is that high quality service with some efficiency, with a lot of efficiency. So this is really the end of it, and I threw that you know, we're here, this is our mission, improve America's future one student at a time, and that is that on our budget update. So, any questions on any of those items at the moment? So we will certainly, over the next couple months, really fill in the rest of the budget and get those items to you.
Kyle.
I can also comment a little bit on Kara's report. Unfortunately, due to some circumstances beyond her control, she was unable to be here this evening. So if it's okay, Mr. Godman, I can just fill you in as part of my report on her report. We did attend a county-wide, Miss Christie, Miss Schroeder, and myself, we attended a county-wide truancy meeting last week. It is the responsibility of the school district that is in the county seat to host regularly, I think they have to do it at least once every 5 years, a countywide truancy meeting. They can do it more often if they'd like. Really what we found, I guess, and maybe Ms. Schroeder would comment if she wants, but I think what we found is our practice is pretty much very similar to every other school's practice. We did talk about enforcement, and are there some, we're really talking a very small percentage of our students who are truly truant. And I mean truant, like they just don't care, or the parents aren't being cooperative. It's really a small percentage. We talked about do fines work in those cases? Maybe, probably not. Most often, sometimes maybe community service will have a little different work on it, but I guess overall I think we had fairly sound practice as to what we were doing. It's very similar to all the other districts, and I would say in terms of truancy, again, it is a small problem, but we try to handle those as we go. The other report that Kara was to give you this evening was on seclusion and restraint. We are required each year to report on seclusion and restraint. So seclusion would be the idea of needing to seclude an extraordinary, like a really disruptive student. And that means seclude them out of the general population. It's not go to the office and sit in the office seclusion. That's not seclusion. Seclusion would be going to a completely different room by themselves potentially, or completely away from everybody else is seclusion. And to be clear, we're not locking kids in rooms and doing those types of things. We number one, we can't lock a child in a room. But it may be just getting them away from the general population. The restraint piece really is something that we train staff. There's a very specific training staff have to go through. Not all staff is trained, only some staff are trained. And it's used sparingly at best, because obviously we don't want to have our staff putting hands on students. But it is really only in that event if a student is really creating a clear and present and imminent risk of their own physical safety or the physical safety of somebody else. This is, unfortunately, that occasionally happens. And now at the middle school and high school, I just will let you know that we had 0 incidents of both that would qualify under seclusion and restraint at the elementary. And I'm not going to break down the detail of this, because this could be, the number is low enough once you break down the detail. I don't want it to be identifiable, but we had 10 recorded incidents total. But beyond that,
How many staff members at the elementary are trained?
I would have to look at our staff list.
Okay.
So it is quite a few between the 2 buildings,
Okay.
but it is not everybody, but it is quite a few.
I mean, can we comment in regards to the, I guess, the number of students that you gave us and so
Yep.
forth? I mean, essentially, of those 10 incidents, there was 4 students that comprised all those incidents.
Yep. Yeah, and that's probably about as far as I want you to go on that,
Yeah.
just because I don't want it to become identifiable.
Yep, okay, then,
Yep. I just say because once you break it down, even, because there is a
Right.
way to break it down even further, it could become identifiable. So,
I guess my only point was, at some point, do we have the capabilities of not allowing some of those students that are repeatedly disrupting the class? I mean, do we have any capabilities of expelling them, or at least to the point where they're close to expulsion? You know, some means to.
That's probably an extraordinarily complicated answer.
Yeah, I know,
And I
and
say
that's-
that just, there are very specific statutory things that a board could ever expel a student for.
Right, and I know that we're, you know,
And then when you,
every child has to be taught, but at what point does
Yep.
one child's
and then when you deal in the realm
rights
of,
impede on other
Yep.
children's rights?
Yep, so there-
Exactly those same thoughts.
yep, and there are some things we've done at different times. With suspension where appropriate, with off-site placement where appropriate. If, you know, in the world of regular education versus special education, you also in special education deal with something called, it's not just an expulsion, you would have to conduct what's called a manifestation hearing. The manifestation hearing is kind of interesting. Basically, if the behavior is a manifestation of a disability, then it's not
Right.
like an expellable thing. It becomes much more difficult to, I shouldn't say it's not totally expellable, it becomes much more difficult to carry that out. It doesn't mean it's impossible, that can be
A tougher thing.
a tougher thing. But we do look for as many approaches to this as we can to try to educate the child, obviously, and educate all the other children. But yes, there are times when it is disruptive, and we do actively try to pursue some
Right.
other means.
I look upon this not only from the standpoint of a meaningful educational experience for these children, which they deserve as long as anybody else does, but I also look upon this as a health and safety issue for their classmates. And if it proves to be so frequent or onerous, then I'm looking at it from the standpoint of a parent of another child. You know, there's some, I have some concerns there about this.
Yes. The cautionary tale though is so when we talk about each of the children, each is different.
Yes.
Each situation is different, and again, bringing in the possible realm of special education complicates matters infinitely. You start getting the state of Wisconsin involved, and potentially down the road lawyers involved. And so it's just one of those things we do actively try to work with the parent, work with the child, but yet be creative in our solutions to the best of our ability and comply with the law. Yeah.
I know,
I understand.
Worth
I sympathize with your question, or I understand your question, because we don't want, every child here deserves an uninterrupted education, so.
All right, thank you for that report. Number 6, questions and comments from people in attendance. No one signed up to address the board. Anyone wish to speak now? All right.
We'll let you change your mind right now. For the next 5 seconds.
All right, moving on. Consent agenda. Number 7, consider approval of minutes of the past meeting, July 17th and August 1st of 2019.
So moved.
Second.
And a motion and a second. Any discussion? All right. All those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say nay. Motion carried. Number 8, consider approval of financial reports. Are there any gifts?
None this
None?
month.
All right. So I'll seek a motion to approve financial reports. As
moved.
given.
I will second it.
A motion and a second, any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Motion carried. Number 9, consider approval of 2019-2020 administrative restructure.
brought to you a proposal to restructure the administration a bit this year, with some of the priorities I listed in the budget, with our increased enrollment. I think we have an opportunity to really actually become, in some ways, more streamlined and get more productivity in some areas, and more efficiency. So ultimately, the proposal being to move to a format that continues the PK6 principal role, but separates out the 7-12 principal from the district administrator role. That is, it's certainly not an uncommon occurrence. In fact, it's more common to see it separated out than to see those roles combined. Much more common even in districts much smaller than ours. So in doing that, I would ask that the board,